We continue to follow this developing story. Myles Garrett leaving his meeting with appeals officer James Thrash today in New York, pleading his case after Garrett was indefinitely suspended by the NFL for swinging a helmet and hitting Mason Rudolph in the head. Under the original terms of his suspension, Garrett, the Browns' Pro Bowl defensive end, would have to sit at minimum for the remainder of this NFL season. But again, it's indefinite. For more, we welcome in our NFL reporter, Diana Rossini, who joins us from New York. So, Diana, the hearing just wrapped up a short time ago. Take us through the day.
Yeah, good afternoon, David. Myles Garrett, along with his parents and his agent, Bus Cook, arrived to his meeting this morning around 9:30, and it only lasted about 90 minutes. They were inside, and then you saw that video just there of them leaving the building. Myles had nothing to say, but I was able to text him real quickly afterwards. I said, "How did you think it went?" He said, "I think it went well." So here's what's on the line now. He's, of course, hoping to have an end game defined for his indefinite suspension or possibly have it reduced to a fixed game total. He pled his request to former NFL wide receiver James Thrash. He was in on all of this, and here's what I'm told. Basically, here's what's on the table. There's several outcomes. Either one, nothing changes, or Thrash could change it from indefinite to a fixed number. I did speak to a source who was inside the hearing, and he told me that you should expect a decision made on this over the next day or two, and the hope is to get this all wrapped up quickly.
Okay, so very short, very expedient there by the league and James Thrash as they try to figure out just how long it's going to be for Myles Garrett on the sidelines. Diana giving us the very latest from New York. Meanwhile, Mason Rudolph spoke to the media today and took some of the blame for what happened last Thursday night. That's new on SportsCenter.
Thursday night, to say the least, it was an unfortunate situation for everyone involved. I consider it a privilege, not a right, to be part of the NFL, to be part of a first-class organization representing the Rooney family and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I fell short of that expectation last Thursday night. I have no ill will towards Myles Garrett. Great respect for his ability as a player, and I know that if Myles could go back, he would handle the situation differently. As for my involvement last week, there's no acceptable excuse. The bottom line is I should have done a better job keeping my composure in that situation, and it falls short of what I believe it means to be a Pittsburgh Steeler and a member of the NFL.
Coming up on Coast to Coast, Myles Garrett's season may be over. The Browns are still going with a shot at a playoff run, trying to build on a 2-game win streak. We'll go live to Cleveland to see how they overcome the loss of their best defensive. Under the terms of his suspension, Garrett would have to sit at minimum for the remainder of this NFL season. Here's Freddie Kitchens on Garrett's appeal, speaking today, new on SportsCenter.
Is there any sense of optimism within the Browns that suspension will be reduced?
We're just going here in this building today. We're worried about Miami. We can't control that. We couldn't control initially. We couldn't, all the sentencing and stuff like that. We're just going to control what we control. We have nothing to do with that. Myles has great representation, but more importantly, Myles will represent himself well. We're going to continue to support him and Larry, and we will not waver with that support.
All right, Freddie Kitchens controlling the controllables. We bring in our Browns reporter, Jake Trotter. So the suspension of the Browns' really best defensive player comes as Cleveland has won 2 in a row. What are you hearing about how the team is trying to move on and keep this going?
Yeah, David, I spoke to somebody inside the Browns organization to get a sense of what it's been like here behind the scenes. And this individual told me that really there hasn't been much talk about Myles, what he did the last couple of days. The message has been to support Myles Garrett as a member of the Cleveland Browns family, but at the same time, we've got to move forward. We have a legit shot at making the playoffs with 2 straight wins. Now, that being said, replacing a player like Myles Garrett, obviously going to be difficult. This week, linebacker Joe Schobert called Garrett a once-in-a-generation player. I asked defensive tackle Sheldon Richardson what kind of void this leaves on the defense, and he said there's no way around it. It's big. The stats speak for themselves. Now, Garrett is not the only Browns defensive lineman appealing a suspension from last Thursday's melee with the Steelers, and the team is privately hopeful that defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi will have his 1-game suspension overturned. He had his hearing Monday. Still no ruling, though, and so for the moment, the Browns are practicing with 1 healthy and eligible starting defensive lineman in Sheldon Richardson. Obviously not ideal. David?
Yeah, and that's not the only place they're shorthanded. They also lost their safety, Morgan Burnett, to a ruptured Achilles last week. So they got some guys to make up for on that defensive unit. Jake Trotter giving us the very latest on the Browns.
All right, David, for more, we bring in our Jeremy Fowler. He's with the Steelers in Pittsburgh. So earlier on the show, Jeremy, we heard from Mason Rudolph. He essentially took some responsibility for his role in last Thursday's brawl. But what did he have to say about his center, Maurkice Pouncey, who is also appealing his 3-game suspension as we speak for coming to his aid during this brawl?
Well, Kerry, Rudolph is clearly feeling the effects of the loss of Pouncey, and the whole locker room has. I talked to several players that they said his void is tangible. This is an unquestioned leader of the Steelers for the better part of the last decade. So the fact that he's missing game checks because he defended a teammate saddens these players. And so Rudolph said he'll accept any fine the NFL gives him, but he feels far worse about his teammate. Check this out.
You know, in retrospect, I put Maurkice Pouncey, probably one of the best teammates I've ever had in a tough spot, as well as my teammates. So, the way I saw it, on the final play of the game, with the game in hand the way it was, it had been, we had already lost 2 of our players to targeting penalties. As I released the ball, I took a late shot, did not agree with the way he then, took me to the ground. And my natural reaction was just to get him off from on top of me. And again, I should have done a better job handling that situation.
Now, Rudolph speaking there, that was a unique situation. The Steelers had ushered Rudolph into a small auxiliary room away from the locker room, and the media followed. And usually he would speak by his locker. This was far different. It was a crowded space. Rudolph had notes with him. He made a statement, and then he said he would take a few quick questions before the team went off to their walkthrough before practice. And so clearly the Steelers and Rudolph both